How's it going today, guys? So what we're talking about today is whether you should buy a house or an apartment, or well, mostly in most cases you rent apartments, but whether you should buy a house or whether you should rent a house. Now it basically depends on what your current situation is, and there's a lot of cases where it makes sense to rent and a lot of situations where it makes sense to buy. So what I'm going to do is first go through what the actual costs are associated with renting versus buying, and then some of the advantages and disadvantages of both of those so you guys get a general idea and maybe you can make a better decision as to whether you want to rent a place or buy a place. Now there are many perks to renting a house instead of buying one, and a lot of that is related to luxury. So if you don't want the annoyance of maintaining a property, of mowing the lawn, of doing the snow removal, of fixing things, fixing leaky faucets, all that, then renting may make sense for you, and this may be a luxury item that's worth it to you to not have to worry about all that stuff. Depending on what stage of life you are in, one may make more sense than the other. So what are the actual costs associated with owning a home? The first one is probably the biggest one. That is your down payment on the home, and that's typically anywhere from 3.5 to 20 or more % down. So on a house that's $200,000, 20% down is $40,000. So that's a significant amount of money. You may be able to do something as a first-time home buyer where you can get less money put down, but 10 to 20% is very typical of what you should expect to have to put down on a property. So you do need to have some money saved up for a down payment on the house. Second is the appraisal as well as the inspection. You should probably consider that you're going to be spending $500 on each of these, and most mortgage companies require this because they want to determine if the house is worth what you're offering, because at the end of the day, if you don't pay your mortgage payments, they need to be able to sell that asset and recover their money, and also whether or not the house is in need of any immediate repair. So combined, that's about $1,000 you have to spend on the appraisal and the inspection. The third is property taxes, and this varies so much depending on where you live. So I can't even begin to guess what that would cost, but this is a recurring cost that you pay every single year. So in some cases you have to pay it twice a year, and some people opt to roll it in with their mortgage so they have a separate account with their mortgage payments that goes towards the taxes, and some people pay it outside of their mortgage, so it's just something you pay twice a year or once a year in most cases. Then you have homeowners insurance as well as flood insurance, and most people don't realize this, but those are completely different things. So if you're in an area that floods, you probably should have flood insurance on top of your homeowners insurance. And again, that just varies so much, I really couldn't put a price on it. Then you have private mortgage insurance. It's called PMI, and most lenders require this if you have less than 20% down, because essentially this protects the lender. So if your property gets foreclosed, if you're not making your payments and they sell at a loss, that insurance covers the gap of what they loaned you versus what they sold it for. So basically that protects the lender, and it's usually required if you have less than 20% down on a house. So that's another factor, another cost you have to factor in, and in most cases it's just factored in with your mortgage payment. Then you have utilities. So this could be your gas or oil or propane depending on what your heat system is, your electric, your water, your sewer, cable and internet, as well as trash service, and if your home has a security system as well, that's another utility that you have to pay for each month in most cases. Then there's the maintenance, and this can be a lot of money. So this is any repairs that need to be done, replacement of old appliances, any painting. The roof is a big one. That's very expensive. If your roof goes bad, you need to reshingle your roof or anything like that. That's a huge expense. HVAC, that's another huge expense, so your heating system or your air conditioning system. And then as well, any landscaping or snow removal. So if you have to clear your own sidewalks and clear your own driveway and you have to maintain a snow blower in order to do that, and if you have to have your own lawnmower, if you don't own these things already, they're things you have to buy to have. And then furnishing is a big one too, because in most cases the new home that you're moving into is larger than your old space, so you're going to have to either go contact your family and see what's in the attic or buy new furniture. So that's something else. A lot of this is recurring costs, but a lot of it's also upfront costs, so you have to have money set aside in order to be able to do this. Now, to compare, what are the costs associated with renting a home? The main one is your monthly rent, and this varies by location. Generally speaking though, if you're in a good neighborhood, in a good area, you're going to be paying more for rent, and if you're in not so good of a neighborhood, it'll be less for rent. And it also depends on the property condition, so whether it's an older house or if it's a new house, as well as the fact that it can change any time. Now basically whenever you renew your lease, your landlord has the ability to increase rent, so it's something to consider. It's kind of, in most cases if you have a good reputation with your landlord, they hopefully will keep it the same, but they do have the right to raise rent if you have to sign another lease. So it may go up if they have that option to do that, so you have to consider that as well. Number 2 is a big one, that is pets. So if you're a pet owner, first of all, some landlords will not even let you rent. And in some cases, if they do, they will require pet rent, which is an additional fee each month, or they will require a security deposit. So if there's any damage to the property as a result of having that pet there, they will hold on to your security deposit, and that's something you don't get back. And in some cases, they require a security deposit regardless, even if you don't have pets. That way, if you do any damage, they can hold on to that. So most people require a security deposit regardless, but there may also be an additional security deposit if you have pets. Number 3 is renter's insurance. This isn't required, and it's also not very expensive, but it's worth having. I know I read somewhere that it's average about $15 a month, but basically this protects your belongings if there's any damage done to them. And I actually have friends of mine who were renting a place, and the ceiling caved in because of a water leak, and all of their belongings were covered, and they got like $5,000 from that. So it's worth it to have just in case the worst case scenario happens. So I bet you they're glad that they were paying $15 a month for that policy. Number 4 is utilities, and there are some cases where it may be paid by the landlord, but it's more frequent that your electric and your gas are paid for by you. Generally, water is metered just for the building, so you don't pay for water, but you may have to pay for your gas and electric. That's very common. And then a big one too that people don't consider is laundry. A lot of places don't have laundry machines, or maybe they have the hookups for them, but you have to bring your own machines. And if you have to do laundry once a week, you got to figure that may cost you, I don't know, maybe $10 a week in laundromat expenses, as well as it takes a lot of time to go to the laundromat and do all of your laundry. So that's basically the costs of renting versus buying a home. Okay, so now we're going to get into the pros and cons of renting versus buying. So first, the pros of buying a house. First of all, the main one is that homeowners build equity over time, and every dollar put towards the principal of a loan builds equity. So eventually, if you pay that house off, you own it free and clear. Or even when you do decide to sell, if you've built up any equity, that is money that you get when you do sell. Homeowners can build sweat equity by making repairs and improvements. So if you're handy yourself and you're good at doing work around the house, and you do things to increase the value of the property, that's money in your pocket at the end of the day. There also may be tax credits and first-time home buyer credits available to you because the government is very encouraging as far as people buying homes and investing in real estate. And your house could even earn you rental income down the road, so if you pay it off and you own it free and clear, or even if you decide to upgrade and maybe build something behind that current house or buy something down the street, you could keep that as a source of rental income. And the other thing that people do as well is the owner-occupant strategy, so they buy a multifamily property, they live in one of the apartments, and they rent out the others. So that's a way to even float your mortgage and live for free in most cases, where basically the rental income from the other apartments pays for all the expenses, which is a great thing to do. You're also free to customize your home, so if you want to make upgrades and customize it, that's completely up to you. You have the ability to do that. And the other thing is that, based on historical data, the house should appreciate in value over time, as long as you own the house for long enough. Now, the cons of buying a house is in a bad market or in a bad area, there's a risk of owning a depreciating asset where the house value goes down as you own it. You're also responsible for all maintenance and repairs, so if there's any major repairs that come up, that could be a significant cost for you. There's also very high upfront costs with buying a house, and many people don't have the means to have a down payment, and as well as all those other expenses we mentioned at the beginning. And you may be in a pinch if you need to relocate all of a sudden, and that's not a good situation to be in, where you have to relocate for a job or for family reasons, and you have to sell a house in a pinch. You definitely don't want to be in that situation. Okay, so what are the pros of renting a house? Well, the main one is that there's zero responsibility for maintenance and repairs. You just call up your landlord and say, hey, the faucet's broken, hey, the roof is leaking, and that is not on you. The only problem is if your landlord isn't good about making repairs, you may have to deal with that, and you may have to hound them as far as making repairs. That might be a bit of a headache. The other thing is that relocation is much easier. So if you're in a job where you have to relocate every couple of years, or if you're not in a job that you're going to stick with long term, or you're new to the area, relocation is much easier when you rent. You just have to either basically stay there as long as your lease, or your landlord may allow you to basically lease it to somebody else under your name or something like that, where you can get out of it easier than when you own the home. There's no exposure to a potentially volatile real estate market because you don't own anything and you're just paying to rent the place, and the value of the home has no effect on you. The credit requirements tend to be less strict, so there's more credit requirements when you're buying a house in most cases versus renting a house. And utilities may be included in some cases depending on the way that the place is structured. And the major advantage of this too is the fact that there's less upfront costs, significantly less upfront costs associated with renting a house. Now the cons of renting a house, there are actually a lot of cons. The main one is that there's no equity being built. You're essentially just throwing that money out the window. You're never going to see any of that money back. The other thing is there's no tax credits or benefits available to renters. The landlord also has the ability to raise rent between lease agreements. So when you're signing your lease agreement, the landlord could raise the rent on you. The other thing is that the landlord has the ability to evict you. So maybe they decide that they want to sell the property and they want to evict you for whatever reason, or maybe they want to move back into the property or move in their family members. They have the ability to evict you. Even if you're a good paying tenant, they can evict you. So that's not good as far as uncertainty of your housing. And then the other problem is that the sale of the property may impact you. So here's two ways. Number one is if the person's trying to sell the property and they're constantly showing the home, they may call you up and say, hey, you got to clean it top to bottom. I have to show the place. So that's kind of a headache. The other thing is too, maybe they sell the property to somebody else and that person decides they want to live there and you could be evicted in that case as well. So those are the cons basically of renting a house. I would say anybody that can afford to, and if they're invested in the area long term, should buy a house. And if you're not invested in the area or you don't have the means for the upfront expenses associated with buying a house, that's a situation where you would want to rent. But anyways, guys, I'm hoping that kind of cleared some things up on renting versus buying. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you drop a like. If you have any feedback, feel free to leave me a comment, as well as any other topics you think I should cover on this channel. I always love hearing what your ideas are. And if you are new to the channel, I'd appreciate it if you guys would subscribe to be notified of all future uploads. And as always, I thank you guys for watching this video.